The Missouri Tigers hope to replicate what they did last year in the 2023 season, going 11-2. Eli Drinkwitz has to deal with some turnover on the coaching staff. He looks to bolster his roster as well in the transfer portal. We're heading to Columbia, Missouri to give you an insight on what the Missouri Tigers are going to look like in the 2024 season. I'm Nathan Johnston here with my co-host Brad Hopkins. It's time to break the huddle. Brad, the Missouri Tigers had a spectacular year last year, going 11-2, one of the best years they've ever had. And it's crazy to think that only 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about Eli Drinkwitz being on the hot seat, not being the guy for Missouri. And now it looks like this program is heading in the right direction. Brad, I'll hand it over to you. Thoughts on Eli Drinkwitz? We know that they have a lot of roster turnover, both in the portal and, of course, to the NFL draft, but they bring back key pieces such as Brady Cook and Luther Burden, I think I pronounced that right, at wide receiver. Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Take it away. What are your thoughts on where the Missouri Tigers are heading into the 2024 season?
Absolutely, Nate. So you mentioned Eli Drinkwitz, on the hot seat. I think, we discussed here on the channel that it was a big year for him, in the lead up to 2023, and boy, did he deliver. Was so impressed with how they played. Brady Cook, I thought, really took a step forward. And, of course, Luther Burden just played up to his 5-star status. That guy is extremely, extremely talented. Of course, I think about when it comes to Luther Burden, the NFL Combine just got done, and Luther Burden, with another year like he had this year, he's going to be there next year, and he's going to be – I would be shocked if he's not a first-round pick. He is just a very, very talented player, a good route runner, has got very, very good speed, and is going to be the focus point of that offense. And Nate, the big question for me with Missouri is, while that passing game was dangerous, I thought it was Cody Schrader that really, really made that offense turn. And they're having to replace him. And that's a very, very big deal. But if you're a Missouri fan, there's some hope. Nate, this is a big transfer. I feel like it's one of the most underrated transfers in college football, but I think it's going to be a good one. That is running back Marcus Carroll. He's transferred from Georgia State. This guy was a beast last year. Nate, I know we talked about this guy a couple times when we previewed, or I'm sorry, when we did a couple of Georgia State pick'em games. This kid is very, very good. Nate, I think he's going to fit perfectly in that Missouri offense. Not saying that he's going to be Cody Schrader, but I think he will do a really, really good job. One other name that I want to give everyone a heads up on. And if you keep up with recruiting, you know this name, edge/defensive lineman Williams Nawarni. I believe I pronounced that correct. He's a Missouri boy. Eli Drinkwitz and that coaching staff got him to stay in state. 6'6.5", 260, great size. That Missouri defense was so good last year, and I'll get to that in just a second, but here's a 5-star kid, one of the highest ever players to sign with Missouri. And Nate, to me, he's going to have a chance to be an immediate impact. The final thing I want to hit on, Nate, you mentioned some coaching turnover. They lose Blake Baker, who did a tremendous job. Nate, I know you were really, really high on him. He did a tremendous job last year. Of course, he's the new DC at LSU. They bring in a guy, Corey Batoon, that was at South Alabama. I think he will do a really, really good job. And look, I think Missouri is going to be good. I've seen them top 10 in a lot of, early preseason polls, top 15 at worst. The big question mark for me is, of course, you've got Georgia. Alabama's still going to be really good. But now you add Texas and Oklahoma into the mix. Where is Missouri? Nate, it could be a case of Missouri, if they replicate last year, they could be a top 3 SEC team. If Cody Schrader is a bigger loss than they're able to account for, and they take a step back on defense, they could be middle of the pack. So I think Drinkwitz and that staff's done a really good job. But I question where they're going to be at with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. But Missouri's an intriguing team for sure.
Yeah, Brad, you hit it right on the nail. I think there's a lot of key pieces heading into the 2024 season, and thank goodness they have their starting quarterback, Brady Cook. That's their centerpiece, and that's the kind of guy that you want to be able to work around. We look at other teams like Ole Miss with Jackson Dart returning, Georgia with Carson Beck returning. That's not the case for a lot of these top programs. And we've seen when turnover happens at the quarterback position or a new quarterback transfers in, look, there's no guarantee for success. But when you look at a guy like Brady Cook and the numbers he was able to put up last year, you bring in a guy like Marcus Carroll, like you said, from Georgia State. I almost wonder if he would have stayed at Georgia State had Del McGee been hired sooner. That was something that I thought about when I was doing my research on this guy. I mean, being the running backs coach that he is, I'm sure Marcus Carroll in the back of his head is not questioning his decision. I think it was the right fit for him. But man, that would have been one heck of a coach to have as a head coach for a guy like Marcus Carroll, who's just a stud. I think it's going to be hard for Missouri to replicate what they had last year, going 11-2 in the SEC East, going against the competition that they had to go against. It wasn't easy for the Missouri Tigers starting off the season. They struggled early with a couple of teams that they probably shouldn't have, but they finished off the year very, very strong. This year, their schedule seems pretty favorably, if you ask me. I mean, yes, they have to play at A&M. They have to play at Alabama. They play Oklahoma, but they avoid Georgia. They avoid Florida. And that's pretty big. I know that there's no more divisions, but Brad, I have to think with the players that they have in place, with the new coaches, you mentioned Corey Batoon coming from South Alabama, which I think had his defense ranked in the top 15 in FBS, averaging, I think, only giving up less than about 300 yards per game, which is pretty good, all things considered, when you average that out. Tied 26th with 22 takeaways, which would have led the Southeastern Conference, the SEC, in 2023. So, I mean, if you're going to replace a guy at defensive coordinator, what a guy to replace him with. And I want to mention a couple of guys in the portal as well for the Missouri Tigers. I look at a couple of defensive guys like Zion Young coming over from Michigan State. This was a pretty underrated recruit, in my opinion, coming from Westlake High School in Atlanta, Georgia. Went to go play for Mel Tucker at Michigan State. Now he gets a second chance at Missouri, looks to bolster that defense. He's a defensive end, 6'5", 226. So he's big, he's stout, but you have to think he's got some speed. On the offensive side, Nate Noel, running back, coming over from App State. We saw what App State was able to do last year with what they were given, and all around. You can go on and on and on. Chris McClendon, coming over from Florida, 6'3", 290. He's a big defensive lineman to pick up. It looks like they went in and picked up a couple of offensive linemen, which I think is a big need for the Missouri Tigers. They get a guy like Caden Green, 6'4.5", 315, coming from Oklahoma. So I think from the portal standpoint, they did a very, very good job. They did a great job going out and replacing coaches that they needed to replace. And like you mentioned, Brad, this is kind of up in the air for the Missouri Tigers. I could see them winning 6 games. I could see them winning 10, maybe more. And at the end of the day, we're going to find out in the fall. But for now, they're shaping up to have a pretty decent season. I think their schedule favors a 9-win season, in my opinion. Of course, we're going to get into more detail as the season gets closer. But as of now, things look pretty promising for the Missouri Tigers.